picture this. Your name is William. You are 15 years old, just a boy really, when the dragon ships appear like ghosts on the gray horizon of your English coastal village in the year 932. Just hours ago, you were laughing with your father as you mended the heavy fishing nets, your mind wandering toward childish dreams of sailing across unknown seas. The smell of salt, the cry of gulls, the warm weight of the net in your hands, all of it felt like the promise of tomorrow. And then tomorrow was stolen. Now your hands are bound cruelly behind your back, rope biting into your wrists as you are shoved into a Norse longhouse. The air inside feels like a living thing, thick, suffocating, crawling down your throat. It reeks of burning peat, sour ale that's been spilled too many times, and something else, something metallic, sickening, almost like the iron tang of blood. Smoke curls low and acrid, stinging your eyes, making you blink as carved dragon. Heads leer from the wooden beams above, their mouths twisted into mocking snarls. Your bare feet slip on sticky planks slick with spilled mead and filth. Warriors circle around you, laughing, tearing at your torn shirt as if your dignity were just another trophy. Behind you, the other prisoners shuffle forward, their faces hollow, silent. You hear only the faint sounds of weeping from those too new to captivity to understand that silence is the safer weapon. The seasoned ones, the ones who've seen this before, just stare blankly, their eyes emptied of everything but quiet knowledge. They know what's coming. You don't. Not yet. A hush falls. The chieftain rises from his carved throne at the far end of the smoky hall. His beard hangs heavy, woven with gold rings stolen from the fingers of your murdered neighbors. The firelight dances on his scarred face as he lifts a hand, pointing directly at you. He says something in Old Norse, words you cannot understand, but you don't need a translation. You know instinctively that whatever he has commanded will shape the rest of your life. The hall erupts in cheers. Hands grab at you from every direction, pulling, clawing, tearing. The roar of approval isn't the sound of drunken amusement, it's celebration, ritual, something planned. And in that moment you realize this is not about ransom, not about slavery. This is about something far worse. What is about to happen to you represents one night in a system of terror, so calculated, so refined, that it stretched across 3 centuries and swallowed hundreds of thousands of victims. This isn't random battlefield cruelty, it's a strategy. Psychological warfare was so effective, it made entire kingdoms surrender without a single battle. You grew up thinking Viking culture meant brave warriors, noble battles, and wild adventures, didn't you? That's the story the world likes to sell. The History Channel with its horned helmets, Hollywood with its heroics. But that's not the truth. Behind the raids, behind the settlements, behind the sagas of courage, there was something darker, something built not on honor, but on humiliation. What happened in these longhouses was carefully constructed, a system designed to strip away identity and turn human beings into tools of terror. It was so effective that it didn't just defeat enemies, it dismantled entire societies. The firelight flickers across faces that look hungry for more than food. Hardened veterans lean forward, their eyes glittering. Children sit cross-legged, craning to see. Women murmur and laugh as if waiting for a play to begin. And you, William, stand there knowing in your gut that you are not a guest. You are the entertainment. What they are about to do to you is notorious. Even warriors hardened by years of slaughter, men who'd faced death in battle without flinching, would beg for a quick blade to the throat rather than endure what you are about to face. This wasn't an accident of war. This was culture. Between 700 and 1100 CE, the Norse perfected the most sophisticated system of intimate terror Europe had ever seen. It wasn't the invention of one sadist, but an institution that included entire villages, entire economies, entire religions. Communities thrived not just by trading goods, but by trading in human suffering. And here's the part that will make your stomach turn. Archaeology confirms it. Excavations at places like Birka and Hedeby reveal structures designed not for worship, not for storage, but for humiliation. Specialized chambers where captives were broken down piece by piece, body and spirit. Skeletal remains show patterns of trauma repeated across age groups, across regions, across generations. Injuries that weren't caused by combat, but by systematic violence carried out over and over again. These weren't random acts of cruelty. They were procedures. Think about that for a moment. A system so refined that even the bones tell the story. Trade records tell it too. From Bergen to Dublin, ports show evidence of human trafficking on an industrial scale. At the peak of Viking raiding, more than 40,000 people were captured each year. Most were killed or forced into labor, but about 15%, people like you, were held for something else, something far worse, and the scale was staggering. Imagine entire towns knowing exactly what awaited them if they resisted. Imagine kingdoms weighing whether their pride was worth the price of their people's suffering. Many chose to surrender, not because they lacked soldiers, but because they couldn't bear the thought of what would happen if their wives, their sons, their daughters were dragged into halls like this. That's the hidden truth of Viking expansion. Not just swords and ships, but smoke, screams, and silence. William, you stand there in the firelight, watching as the crowd leans forward, waiting for the ritual to begin. And you realize your life is no longer your own. But here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. Why do we still celebrate them? Why do we still romanticize Vikings as explorers and adventurers when the truth is carved into bone and written in blood? The moment they seize you, William, the longhouse changes from a smoky hall into a cage. The warriors laugh, as if your terror were a joke shared among old friends. You are dragged to the center, forced to your knees on planks sticky with ale and blood. The crowd leans in closer. Everyone wants to see this. First comes the examination. They strip you bare, tossing your clothes into the fire as if your past life were nothing but kindling. Their hands are rough, probing, assessing, turning you this way and that. It isn't random humiliation, it's an inventory. You feel like livestock being checked before a market sale. Muscles are pressed, teeth examined, scars noted. A warrior grips your chin, twisting your face toward the firelight to judge your features. You try to cover yourself, but iron hands wrench your arms down. The message is clear. Your body belongs to them now. Then the chieftain gives a signal. Someone pulls a rod from the fire, the tip glowing red hot. Your stomach drops as they step closer. You want to run, but the ropes hold you tight. You want to scream, but your throat locks with terror. The iron hisses as it presses into your shoulder. Flesh sizzles, and the smell of your own burning skin fills your nose. You scream then, louder than you ever have before. The hall erupts in laughter. Men raise their cups, women clap, children watch with fascination. To them, this isn't horror, this is entertainment. And the mark seared into your shoulder, it isn't just a brand, it's a declaration. You are no longer William, son of an English fisherman. You are property, a thing, a vessel. The gold-braided chieftain grins as you slump forward, half fainting from the pain. To him, you are already erased. Why do they do this? Why make pain into ritual? Because ritual lasts longer than death. A sword to the chest is over in seconds, but this lingers. It scars the flesh, the mind, and the memory of everyone watching. And in that memory lies power. You aren't the first to wear this brand, and you won't be the last. Archaeologists have uncovered countless bones marked by burns, carvings, ritual cuts. They tell the same story, people turned into symbols, into warnings, into lessons. This was the Viking strategy. Break one body to control 1,000. Your journey doesn't end in the longhouse. That was only the opening act. After the branding, you are shackled to other captives. Men, women, children. Chains bite into your ankles as you're marched out into the night air. The moon reflects off the dragon ships waiting on the shore, their carved prows like beasts hungry for prey. You are shoved aboard, the wood creaking under the weight of human cargo. And then the journey north begins. The weeks blur into one another, 3, maybe more. Days marked only by the rhythm of oars and the sting of ropes. You are fed scraps, stale bread, sour water. At night, shackled in positions designed to keep you uncomfortable, you cannot sleep for long before a hand yanks you awake. Sometimes it's to remind you that your body isn't your own. Sometimes it's for nothing at all. Cruelty here doesn't need a reason. And all around you, silence. The older captives know the rules. Don't cry, don't speak, don't hope. Hope is the most dangerous thing. You cling to it anyway, whispering prayers to a god who feels farther away with each passing mile. Every humiliation is intentional. The raiders aren't improvising. They've done this before, countless times. This is a system refined across generations, one that stretches across oceans and continents, feeding a network of markets that make human lives more profitable than gold. Think about that for a moment. Entire economies built not on bravery, but on the breaking of boys like you. At last, you reach the northern settlement. You expect cages, chains, darkness. Instead, you find something worse, a community waiting with open arms. The welcome ceremony begins as soon as you arrive. The entire village gathers, men, women, children, even elders leaning on canes. Fires blaze high, drums echo, and you are shoved into the center like an animal at auction. The people cheer as if celebrating a festival, and in a way, they are. Your degradation is their entertainment, their bonding, their tradition. You are forced to kneel, to bow, to speak words you don't understand. A man slaps you hard across the face when you hesitate. Blood fills your mouth, metallic and bitter. The crowd roars with approval. You're made to thank them for moldy bread, for fouled water, for the privilege of still being alive. And here's the cruelest part. It worked. Every forced word, every humiliating act chips away at the boy you were. Each ritual strips another layer of your identity until only obedience remains. The Norse didn't just want slaves. They wanted symbols, living reminders that resistance meant not just death, but a fate far worse. Their law codes protected this system, their religion sanctified it, their communities celebrated it. And so, men like you, William, became proof that the gods demanded suffering, proof that submission was wiser than defiance, proof that terror was stronger than courage. You look around at the faces staring down at you. Children laugh, women smile knowingly, warriors grin as they sharpen their blades, and you realize this isn't just about you. This is about them, about how your suffering cements their unity, their power, their culture. Here's a question you need to ask yourself now. If an entire community can build itself on cruelty and call it tradition, what does that say about human nature? The breaking didn't end with the welcome ceremony, William. That was just the beginning. Once the shouting died down and the firelight dimmed, you were marched into your new quarters. At first you thought it was a prison cell. Stone walls, wooden beams, a floor stained darker in some places than others. But then you realized it wasn't a cage meant for animals. It was worse. It was housing for property. You were property. They called it thrallhood. The word sounds almost harmless to modern ears, softened by centuries of distance. But in the Viking world, being a thrall meant every breath, every glance, every movement you made was no longer yours. You were currency, status, a tool that could be traded, loaned, or destroyed at whim. Your owner's name was Bjorn, a broad-shouldered man with scars across his chest and rings in his beard. In the village, people respected him. They said his ships had brought wealth, his raids had brought glory, his family had power. To you, he was something else. He was the architect of your life, the one who decided whether you ate or starved, whether you slept or suffered. He could gift you to a guest as easily as he'd gift a drinking horn. You weren't William anymore. You were whatever he needed you to be. Your quarters weren't private. They were communal. Other thralls lived there too, chained along walls, bodies scarred, eyes hollow. But you weren't allowed to bond with them. If you spoke too long to another captive, you'd be separated. If you tried to comfort someone, you'd be punished. The Norse knew how dangerous solidarity could be. They couldn't risk friendships turning into alliances or whispers turning into resistance. The daily routine stripped away whatever hope remained. At dawn, you were dragged from sleep, beaten if you didn't move quickly enough. Tasks were given not to sustain you, but to remind you of your worthlessness. Sometimes it was hauling buckets of water until your arms shook. Sometimes it was standing for hours, forced into degrading positions, while others passed by, laughing at your discomfort. Then there were the nights. Nights when Bjorn would summon you to the hall, not for labor, but for display. You became a prop in his feasts, proof of his wealth, his power, his dominance. Guests would watch you, handle you, command you, the way others might admire a prized horse or an exotic weapon. The humiliation wasn't private, it was public. That was the point. Do you see it yet? This wasn't just cruelty, this was psychology. The Vikings understood that to truly dominate a people, You didn't just kill their soldiers. You broke their sons, you branded their children, you displayed their daughters, and then you sent the survivors home, carrying stories that would terrify entire kingdoms. That was more effective than swords. That was empire building through fear. And William, you were the living proof of that strategy. Over time, you changed, not because you wanted to, but because the system was designed to force it. At first, you resisted, clinging to the memory of your father's voice, the smell of the sea, the dreams of sailing beyond the horizon. But resistance had a price. If you hesitated, you were punished. If you cried, you were punished harder. If you disobeyed, others were punished in your place, their screams ringing in your ears until guilt pressed heavier than chains. Slowly, you learned the rules. You spoke when spoken to. You lowered your eyes. You responded instantly when Bjorn snapped his fingers, like a trained dog. And eventually, the boy named William faded. What remained was a hollow shell the Norse considered a good thrall. Here's the part that chills you even more. The community celebrated this transformation. Women in the household treated your obedience as routine. They trained you in silence, punishing mistakes, rewarding compliance. Children grew up watching it all as if it were no different from learning how to milk goats or repair nets. They laughed at your humiliation, sometimes joining in, imitating their father's cruelty like it was a game. This wasn't hidden. This wasn't shameful. It was daily life. And beyond the household, the system stretched even further. Festivals and religious ceremonies often included thralls like you as part of the entertainment. Ritual humiliation was woven into seasonal celebrations, reinforcing the idea that your suffering wasn't just accepted, it was sacred. At the winter solstice, competitions were held where warriors invented new methods of breaking thralls in front of the crowd. People cheered, children clapped, and you stood there knowing that to them, your pain was a gift from the gods. You began to wonder, was this what they believed? That your suffering ensured good harvests, safe voyages, victory in raids? Archaeological evidence suggests yes. Fertility rituals dedicated to gods like Frey and Freyja often included human offerings, not always through death, but through humiliation. Your body, your dignity, your screams became part of religious devotion. And in that realization, another horror crept in. This wasn't about one cruel man named Bjorn. It wasn't about one violent raid. This was about a culture that had normalized your destruction so completely that empathy itself was treated as weakness. Do you want proof? Law codes from the Viking Age spelled it out. Thralls weren't just tolerated, they were legislated. Rules dictated how they could be used, traded, punished. If you resisted, punishments were codified, escalating in brutality. Your worth was recorded in silver pieces, fluctuating with your health and appearance. You were livestock with a heartbeat, and through it all, you felt yourself slipping further from who you were. The memories of your village grew hazy. The sound of your mother's laugh, the warmth of your father's hand, they became distant, dreamlike. You began responding automatically to commands in Norse, your native English faltering on your tongue. Even your name sounded foreign when you whispered it to yourself in the dark. The boy William was vanishing, replaced by something else, a product of the system. But here's the question that claws at you in the silence of the night, if cruelty can erase identity so thoroughly. How many Williams were lost to history? How many voices silenced, names forgotten, memories erased, until all that remains is the myth of Viking glory? By your second winter in the North, William, your body was no longer your own, and neither was your mind. The boy who once dreamed of adventure across the sea had been replaced by a figure who obeyed commands before they were spoken, who lowered his head instinctively, who no longer looked anyone in the eye. The transformation was so complete that even the children of the village stopped calling you by a name. They whistled for you, snapped their fingers, or tugged your chain like you were a dog. Sometimes they invented new names for their own amusement, mocking nicknames, cruel jokes. And each time you answered, because to refuse was to invite punishment so severe, it erased hesitation itself. The Norse didn't just own your labor, They owned your very existence. Every ritual humiliation chipped away at the last fragments of your humanity. And they did it in public so that everyone could learn the lesson carved into your body. Resistance doesn't just bring death, it brings erasure. The system worked. Neighboring kingdoms, hearing whispers of what happened to captives, surrendered before the dragon ships ever touched their shores. Why risk seeing their sons and daughters turned into what you had become? Why resist when terror itself was a weapon sharper than any sword? You lived long enough to understand how deeply this system was woven into Norse society. Your value was recorded in ledgers alongside livestock and tools. You were traded, loaned out, sometimes promised as part of agreements between warriors. Your body was collateral, your suffering currency. Archaeological discoveries confirm this chilling reality. Account books, bone trauma patterns, settlement, layouts designed not just for farming or raiding, but for the storage and processing of human beings. The longer you lived, the more you realized that this wasn't just your story. It was a pattern repeated across centuries. DNA evidence shows sudden surges of foreign maternal lineages in Scandinavia during these years. Entire generations of women, captives taken from Ireland, England, Francia, the Baltic, folded into the Norse bloodline not by choice, but by force. Their children grew up as Vikings, while their names, languages, and cultures vanished. The past was consumed, digested, replaced. Your life became proof of a system so efficient that modern historians struggle to comprehend its scale. Between the 8th and 11th centuries, tens of thousands of captives like you disappeared into this machinery each year. Most were never seen again. Their memories vanished not because they were unimportant, but because their erasure was the very point. And still, it didn't end with ownership. Whole communities joined in. Festivals turned your degradation into entertainment. Rituals made your humiliation holy. Law codes made your suffering legitimate. Children grew up watching it all and learning to smile at screams. Cruelty became culture, and culture became identity. By your third year, William, you no longer tried to resist. You no longer whispered prayers to the God of your youth. You barely remembered the sound of your mother's voice. Your English faltered, replaced by Norse commands, barked at you day after day. Even your memories betrayed you, slipping into fog until you weren't sure if the life before had been real or only a dream. This was the real victory of the Vikings, not their ships, not their swords, not even their daring. It was their ability to erase, to turn men into silence, to turn lives into shadows. And then, in your fourth winter, your body finally gave out, malnourished, scarred, broken inside and out. You collapsed during a midwinter festival. There was no mourning, no funeral, no grave. Bjorn wrote your passing into his ledger as a line of property lost, worth 12 silver pieces. That was all. A human life reduced to a number scratched on parchment. The community moved on without pause. Another captive would take your place soon enough. The cycle continued, generation after generation. And history? History forgot you too. When Christian scribes later wrote about the Norse, they softened the edges, leaving out the systematic terror. Missionaries who had seen the truth often destroyed their own records, calling them too horrific for civilized minds. Saga writers centuries later reshaped Viking identity into one of brave warriors and fearless explorers. The systematic humiliation, the intimate violence, the destruction of human identity, all of that was quietly erased, swept under the rug of collective denial. And so the myth was born. Vikings as bold adventurers, noble seafarers, icons of strength. A myth repeated in classrooms, carved into popular culture, dressed up in horned helmets and Hollywood glory. But beneath that myth lies you, William, and the countless others who vanished into the machinery of Norse expansion. You were never supposed to be remembered, but you must be. Because the story of the Vikings isn't just about courage and ships. It's about what happens when entire societies normalize cruelty, when laws protect abusers, when religion sanctifies violence, when communities make degradation into ritual. It's about how fast humanity can vanish when empathy is stripped away. Think about this. How many other cultures, how many other times have hidden their cruelties under the veil of tradition, honor, or faith? The Vikings aren't an exception. They're a mirror. They show us what humanity becomes when suffering turns into entertainment. when exploitation becomes economy, when erasure becomes victory. Your story ends in silence, William, but it also echoes. Each scar uncovered by archaeologists, each record found in dusty archives, each whisper passed down by terrified chroniclers, they all speak for you now. And maybe that's the real lesson. Not just that the Vikings built their empire on cruelty, but that forgetting cruelty allows it to return. So next time you see a Viking helmet on a t-shirt or a show about noble raiders on television, remember what's missing. Remember the boy whose name was William, who dreamed of the sea, who vanished into the longhouse firelight. Because the truth isn't in the myth, it's in the silence of those who never returned home. And now you know.